Hello YouTube. Today we're going to learn how to program the Roland TR-909. The manual can be a bit confusing, so hopefully this video will demystify and simplify the process. When the 909 first powers on, it starts in its default state known as track play mode. To program a sequence, you will need to enter pattern write mode. The first thing we're going to do is change the tempo mode to what works for our desired application. There are 3 tempo modes total. The first is an external MIDI sync mode, the second is an external DIN sync mode, and the third is an internal sync mode, which is what we'll be using today. If you want to clock the 909 to another piece of gear's tempo, you'll need to be in either DIN sync mode or MIDI sync mode depending upon what the other gear is compatible with. To choose tempo mode, hold the Shift button while pressing the tempo mode button. The Shift button gives you access to all of the options highlighted in orange underneath the buttons. That's why Shift is also highlighted in orange. You'll need to tap the Tempo Mode button until the display shows either a 0 in the middle for MIDI, a 0 in the left for DIN, or it displays the internal BPM, for example here, 120. Next, we're going to select one of the 2 available banks, Bank 1 or Bank 2. We'll select Bank 1 by holding Shift and pressing the Roman numeral 1 button above the orange bank section. Each bank has 3 pattern write groups, and each pattern write group has a total of 16 patterns represented by the 16-step sequencer buttons along the bottom of the unit. Third, we'll enter pattern write mode by holding the Shift button once again and pressing one of the 3 pattern group buttons above the orange pattern write section. We'll choose pattern write group 1, and you'll see the button we pressed is now blinking, indicating you are in edit mode. Next, we'll choose a pattern to clear so we can start with a clean slate. We're going to hold the clear button and press the pattern 1 button. Now, when you press start, you will see the step sequencer running and looping, but you will not hear anything yet. With the 909 still running the empty sequence, you will now choose if you want to program a pattern in step mode or tap mode. To program the pattern in step mode, just hold the Shift button and press the step button above the orange pattern write mode section. When you first enter the step pattern write mode, you will be on the bass drum sound, and when you press any of the 16 step buttons, the LED will light up first with a faint blinking light indicating a normal step, or if you press the same button a second time, the LED will be solid indicating an accented step. Hitting it a third time will clear the step. Let's press the following step sequencer buttons twice each, 1, 5, 9, and 13 for a 4 on the floor accented kick pattern. Now let's add some non-accented kicks in the sequence for some groove by pressing 8 and 11 just 1 time each. To change from the bass drum to another sound like the snare drum, hold the instrument select button and choose one of the 2 buttons above the snare drum section. You'll see the LED lights move from the bass drum section to the snare drum section once you click the snare drum buttons while holding the instrument select button. Now you can enter 2 accented steps into the sequence by double pressing the 5 and 13 buttons in the sequencer. You'll repeat this process for all of the available sounds you'd like to use in the pattern. The one sound that's slightly different to access is the open hi-hat. While holding the instrument select button, you'll press both buttons 13 and 14 at the same time to choose the open hi-hat. Let's program the following steps, 3, 7, 11, and 15. You'll also notice the open hats do not have a non-accented option. They are just solid or off. Now we'll enter the tap pattern write mode to program the rest of the sequence. Hold Shift and press the tap button above the orange pattern write mode section. You'll see the visual representation of the steps will disappear and the pattern 1 light will flash to indicate we're still editing pattern 1. Anytime you press one of the 16 buttons while the sequence is running, it will write that sound at the corresponding step in the sequence. Let's try it with the 3 different tom sounds. I'm going to play each normal and accented tom sound how I imagine it sounding. Next, I'll add some clap and rim shots. Notice how both of these sounds do not have an accented option. The same goes for the crash, the ride, and as we mentioned before, the open hi-hat. Now I'll add some closed hi-hats. Notice when I enter the closed hi-hats into the sequence, it overwrites the open hi-hats I programmed earlier. If I wanted those back, I would just reprogram them by pressing both buttons 13 and 14 at the same time at the moments I wanted them. For example, One thing to note about the hi-hats is that the closed hi-hat will always choke the open hi-hat, meaning that if your open hi-hat decay knob is set to maximum, but a closed hi-hat step is programmed directly after an open hi-hat step, it will close the open hat. If you leave an empty space after an open hi-hat with a long decay, you'll hear the total decay time. Getting creative with the timings can help create unique grooves. You can see this best in the step pattern write mode. You'll see as I remove the 16th closed hi-hat step, you'll hear more of the open hi-hat's decay. To program the total accent, which level is adjusted with the knob on the top left, you'll hold Instrument Select and press the Total Accent button next to the volume knob. You'll then choose which steps you want to be affected by the total accent. This will affect all sounds programmed on the same steps. The next feature we'll show off is the Shuffle Flam. To adjust the shuffle, you'll hold the Shuffle Flam button and press one of the 1 through 7 buttons represented by this first line above the numbers, with 7 being the most extreme shuffle setting and 1 being no shuffle. 4 or 5 will more than likely be the shuffle sweet spot if you use it. To adjust the flam, the process is a little different. First, you want to select which sound you like to flam, and you may only flam the first 5 sounds, bass drum through high tom. Let's choose the snare drum by holding the Instrument Select button and pressing one of the 2 snare drum buttons. You will see the 2 steps we have programmed on the 5 and 13 buttons. Remember these 2 steps. Now we'll hold the Instrument Select button and press the 2 snare drum buttons at the same time. You'll see both LEDs on steps 5 and 13 disappear, but you can still hear them. Now you'll press the 5 button to select this sound step as the one you want to flam. You should hear a ratcheted double hit of the snare drum on the 5th step. You can adjust the timing of the flam by holding the Shuffle Flam button and selecting one of the 9 through 16 buttons on the sequencer represented by the second line above the steps. 9 being the shortest time and 16 being the longest time. When you go back to edit the normal steps of the snare drum by holding Instrument Select and pressing one of the snare drum buttons, you'll see the 5th step is no longer lit, but you can still hear it with the flam effect. To override it, simply reprogram the 5th step again in this mode and the snare is back to normal. You can also change the time signature while a sequence is running by hitting the Scale button, which will cycle through one of the 4 available time signatures, which are simply just different subdivisions of the pattern. But we'll go back to the normal 4/4 time signature at the bottom of the options. Now that we have our first pattern programmed, let's listen to what's programmed on pattern 2 by selecting the 2 buttons and hitting Start. That's cool, but now if we want to chain patterns 1 and 2 together, we can do this by holding down the 1 button and pressing the 2 button. Both buttons will light with button 1's light blinking. Now when you press Start, it will cycle through 1 and 2 repeatedly. Say you wanted to hear patterns 1 through 5 chained together. You'll stop the sequence, hold down the 1 button and press the 5 button, which will cause the first 5 buttons to light with the first blinking. When you hit Start, it will cycle through all 5 patterns, then repeat until you hit Stop. Now that we have multiple patterns we like using, let's enter track write mode to write a track. Make sure the unit is not running and hold Shift and hit the track write number 1 button. While still holding the Shift button, hit the 13th step button to delete the current track, then hit the last measure button followed by the Enter button, all while still holding the Shift button. The measure count will return to 1. Select the first pattern and hit Start on the 909 followed by Enter. This will make your first pattern play in the first measure. The number 2 will display indicating which pattern will play during the second measure. Hit Enter again. This will put pattern 1 in the first and second measures, and 3 will now display. Now choose pattern 2, the pattern will change and you will hit Enter twice, making the second pattern play during the third and fourth measures. 5 will now be displayed. Hit pattern 4 now, and the sequence will change, and then you'll hit Enter, then Stop. Next, you'll press the track play number 1 button. The number 1 will display indicating the first measure of the first track. Hit Start and you'll hear pattern 1 play twice, followed by pattern 2 twice, and pattern 4 once. Then the sequence will end on its own. This is how you build a track, and referencing the manual for the remaining functions is fine as those parts are explained thoroughly enough. The final process we'll show you is how to initialize the 909 and restore it to factory settings. This will erase all patterns and tracks, so beware if you do not want to lose anything. To initialize, power off the unit first, then hold down the track play number 1 and pattern play number 1 buttons at the same time while powering on the 909. Once it's on, release the 2 buttons and you're back to normal. I hope this video showed you something you may not have known about this elusive machine. Thanks for tuning in to the Rosen Sound YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe.